Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Snow blanketed the courtyard like a burial shroud. Alara's knees hit the ground, her body trembling as pain ripped through her abdomen. The contractions were coming too fast, too hard. Around her, wolves in human form stood watching, their breath fogging in the freezing air. At their center, Alpha Ronan's expression was carved from ice. "You are no Luna of mine," he declared, voice echoing like thunder over stone. Alara's lips trembled. "Ronan, I'm carrying your heir." But his gaze was cruel, distant. "You shame my bloodline with weakness," he spat. Then, turning to his enforcers, he added, "Leave her at the border. Let the forest finish what fate began." The crowd murmured, but none disobeyed. The mark on her neck, his mark, burned and then dimmed, fading like dying embers. The rejection hit her like a blade to the heart. As they turned away, Alara collapsed onto the snow, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other digging helplessly into the ice. The world tilted. Pain tore through her again. She tried to scream, but only a hoarse gasp came out. She crawled, each movement leaving streaks of blood on the white ground. The border loomed ahead. The dark tree line where the safety of the pack ended and wild death began. "Please," she whispered to the shadows, "let my baby live." The wind howled in reply, carrying away her words, her vision blurred, her mind flickering with fragments of memory. Ronan's touch when he'd once been gentle, the nights he'd sworn he loved her, the slow poison of his ambition. He'd wanted a strong Luna, not an Omega born from the lowest den. He'd wanted power, not love. And now, as pain racked her body, she realized he'd rather kill his own child than risk looking weak before his warriors. She reached the tree line and collapsed beside a frozen stream. Her body convulsed as another wave of pain hit. She screamed into the storm, her voice swallowed by the wind. Her wolf, faint, barely there after rejection, whimpered deep within her soul. The world was shrinking to one sound, the racing heartbeat inside her belly. "Hold on," she whispered to her unborn child. "Just a little longer." Then, through the snow's roar, came footsteps, heavy, confident, not from Darkfield. The scent was different, earth and steel, wolf and pine. She tried to crawl backward, but her strength failed. A tall figure emerged from the mist, cloak rippling behind him, golden eyes glowing through the dark. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice low, steady. "You'll die if you stay here." Alara blinked, barely recognizing his face. "You're from Moonspire," she breathed, her words trembling. "You shouldn't be here." Drevin knelt beside her, his massive frame blocking the wind. "Neither should you," he replied softly. She tried to move away, but her body refused. "Ronan left me," she whispered. "Said the forest could have me." For a moment, something raw flickered in his eyes. Fury, maybe sorrow. He brushed snow from her cheek, his hand warm against her freezing skin. "Then the forest refuses," he said quietly. He tore his cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it around her trembling body. "Can you stand?" She shook her head, eyes filled with tears. "Please, my baby." Her voice broke, and with it something broke inside him too. "Then I'll stand for you," he said. Without hesitation, he lifted her, cradling her, as if she were made of glass and fire all at once. The snow swallowed their footprints as he carried her deeper into the woods. The storm howled, covering the scent trail, hiding them from the wolves that might follow. Alara's head rested weakly against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, against her ear. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" His answer came like the low rumble of thunder. "Because no one should die begging for mercy." Her eyes fluttered shut as darkness pulled her under. The last thing she felt before she slipped into unconsciousness was his hand tightening protectively around her, as though he was holding not just her life, but her hope itself. And when the moon finally broke through the clouds, its silver light fell upon the trail they'd left behind, blood on snow, fading fast. Back in Darkvale, Ronan stood upon his balcony, convinced she was dead, his pride intact. But in the silence of the forest, 2 heartbeats still echoed, fragile, defiant, and alive. The forest hadn't finished her. It had delivered her instead, into the arms of the one man she was never meant to meet. Long before the snow and blood, before the world turned its back on her, Alara had believed in miracles. She'd grown up in the lower dens of Darkvale, a place where Omegas learned silence before speech, obedience before pride. Yet even then, she had eyes that dreamed. While others cowered, Alara would stand on the ridge at night, gazing at the moon, whispering to it like an old friend. She believed the moon listened. She believed it had plans for her. When the Alpha called for the annual choosing, she had gone only because her sister dared her to. No Omega had ever been chosen as Luna. No one expected her to even be seen. But when Ronan's gaze swept the line of trembling she-wolves and stopped on her, the silence that followed had been the loudest sound she'd ever heard. "You," he'd said, his voice slow, deliberate. "Come forward." And though every instinct screamed at her to bow, she raised her head instead. The moonlight caught her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, hunger, curiosity, or maybe fate. The weeks that followed had felt like a dream carved from silver. Ronan was not yet cruel then, or perhaps he simply hid it well. He spoke to her softly, his voice roughened by command but tempered by fascination. He called her his wild spark. He said she made him forget the blood and the wars, that her scent quieted his rage. She had believed him. The pack whispered behind her back, called her unworthy, a mistake, an Omega playing Luna, but she didn't care. At night, when he held her, she felt safe, or what she thought was safety. When he marked her, she'd wept, believing it meant forever. She didn't see the coldness in his eyes when he looked away, or the way his beta flinched each time her name was spoken. Ronan had chosen her not for love, but for what she represented, proof that he could own even the lowest soul and make her kneel beneath him. It began to change the night he returned from the Eastern Border War. His soldiers said he'd slaughtered 30 rogues in a single night. When he came back, blood still drying on his armor, Alara ran to him, her hands trembling with worry. But when she reached for him, he caught her wrist, his grip too hard. "You shouldn't touch me until you've earned the right," he said coldly, pulling away. Her heart stuttered. "I'm your mate," she whispered, confused. "That's not enough," he replied, walking past her. From then on, the warmth in their den froze. He stopped calling her by name, stopped seeking her out beneath the moon. He spoke instead of airs, of strength, of the weakness that would destroy packs if left unchecked. The others began to mirror his cruelty, servants turning silent when she entered, warriors smirking as she passed. The Luna's seat grew colder every day, and soon even the air in her chambers felt like punishment. When Alara discovered she was with child, she'd thought it might heal the distance between them. She'd gone to him that night, hands trembling, voice soft with hope. "Ronan," she'd whispered, "our child." But his face had darkened, not brightened. He'd said nothing for a long time, then turned away. "You're certain?" "Yes," she'd said, smiling weakly. "I can feel it." His eyes, once the color of wildfire, burned now like dying coals. "An heir born from weakness will doom this pack." The words shattered her. She reached for him, desperate, but he recoiled as if she carried disease. "Ronan, please." "Enough." His growl silenced her. "If the child is weak, neither of you will see sunrise." She'd stumbled back, heart cracking with disbelief. "You can't mean that." "I do." He walked away, leaving her in a silence so vast it swallowed even her breath. That night, she cried beneath the moon until her tears froze on her cheeks. The next morning, The council gathered. She was summoned to stand before them, her belly still small beneath her robe. The beta's voice rang out. By order of Alpha Ronin, Luna Alara is hereby stripped of title and cast out of the pack until the child's strength can be proven. The murmurs were cruel, the eyes sharper than blades. Alara's knees wobbled, but she refused to fall. She met Ronin's gaze across the room, his expression unreadable, heartless. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "He is yours. He deserves life." But Ronin only turned away, saying the words that sealed her fate. "The forest will decide." She'd fallen to her knees then, the sound of her own heartbeat deafening in her ears. In that moment, she understood that love had never lived in him, only control. And as she was dragged to the border that night, snow beginning to fall, Alara realized something even more painful. She wasn't just fighting for her child's life. She was fighting to remember who she used to be before she ever believed in him. Alara woke to the sound of fire snapping in the hearth. Her body ached, her skin slick with cold sweat. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, only the softness of fur beneath her and the faint smell of pine smoke. Then the memory hit her like a storm. The snow, Ronin's voice, the pain. She sat up sharply, gasping, and a hand pressed gently to her shoulder. "Easy," a low voice said. She turned. Draven, the golden-eyed stranger from the blizzard. He knelt beside her, his cloak draped over her like a blanket. His face was half hidden in shadow, scar cutting from his temple to his jaw, but his eyes glowed steady and calm. "You're safe," he said quietly. She looked around. Rough stone walls, a fire pit, a single window showing the mountain mist outside. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Moonspire," he replied. "My land." Her breath caught. "You shouldn't have brought me here. If Ronin finds out—" "Let him," Draven interrupted, his tone low but sharp. "I don't answer to him." Silence filled the room, thick and uneasy. Alara touched her stomach, panic flickering across her face. "The baby." Draven nodded once. "Alive. You were lucky." Relief trembled through her. "How long have I been here?" 2 nights, he said. "You nearly bled out. My healer did what she could." His gaze softened briefly. "You're stronger than most I've met." She looked down at her trembling hands. "I don't feel strong." Draven studied her quietly, as though weighing something he couldn't yet name. "Strength isn't what you feel," he said. "It's what keeps you breathing when you don't want to." For a long moment they sat in silence, firelight flickering over stone, wind howling beyond the walls. Then Alara whispered, "He'll come for me." Draven's jaw tightened. "Let him try." The quiet authority in his voice sent a strange shiver through her, fear and safety all at once. That night, while the fire burned low, Alara couldn't sleep. The pain had dulled, but her mind wouldn't rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ronin's face, the coldness in his eyes as he turned away. She rose from the furs, clutching her cloak, and stepped to the small window. Outside, Moonspire stretched beneath the cliffs, stone houses built into the mountainside, lights flickering like stars. Wolves patrolled the ridges below, their eyes catching the moonlight. It was quieter here, colder too, but the air didn't feel cruel. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering, "I shouldn't be here." Behind her, Draven's voice came again, soft, distant. "You should be alive." She turned. He stood at the doorway, half dressed in a dark tunic, scars catching the light. "You saved me," she said. "Why?" He leaned against the frame, his eyes unreadable. "Because I know what it means to be thrown away." Alara frowned, her heart catching. "Your pack did that to you?" He gave a bitter half-smile. "No, my father did." His voice carried weight, a story buried deep beneath the surface. "He thought weakness was a sickness. When my mother died giving birth to me, he called me cursed. When I became Alpha, I swore no one in my land would die for another's pride." He stepped closer, his gaze steady on her. That's why I brought you here, Alara. Not because of pity, because you were left for dead over a man's ego." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said her name like that, not since the night Ronan marked her. She looked down, blinking back tears. "You shouldn't risk your pack for me," she whispered. "Darkvale will hunt you." Draven's expression hardened. "Let them come," he said. "Moonspire doesn't bow to cowards." For the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel since before the rejection. Safety. But safety never lasted long in their world. Before dawn, the scent of smoke and ash filled the air. Draven's warriors burst into the room, armor glinting with frost. "Alpha," one said urgently. "Scouts found Darkvale trackers near the border." Draven's eyes sharpened instantly. "How close?" "Too close." Alara's heart dropped. "He found me," she whispered, voice trembling. Draven turned to her, steady as ever. "No," he said. "He'll have to get through me first." She shook her head, panic rising. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I've seen what he's capable of," Draven cut in, his voice low and fierce. "He leaves scars. I build walls." Then, softer. "You and your child won't be taken." He turned to his warriors. "Get her and the newborn to the inner den. No one crosses that line but me." As they moved to obey, Alara stared at him, a silent battle raging behind her eyes. Fear, hope, disbelief. And then, just before she was led away, she said the words that would echo long after the night ended. "If you fight him," she whispered, "you'll start a war." Draven met her gaze, unflinching. "Then let it burn." The first howl broke the morning silence like a blade through glass. Alara jolted awake, clutching her baby close. The den was dim, the air thick with smoke and fear. Outside, the wind carried the scent of blood. Familiar, hated, Darkvale. Ronan had come. She could hear the thunder of paws, the clash of steel and claws beyond the walls. Moonspire warriors shouted orders, their voices muffled by the chaos. The baby stirred, crying softly. Alara's arms trembled as she whispered, "Shh, my love, please." Her heart raced. She could feel her wolf inside her chest again, weak but stirring, the part of her that refused to die. The door burst open. A warrior stepped in, armor splattered with frost and ash. "Luna," he said, the word strange on his tongue. "Alpha Draven says to stay hidden." She shook her head, fear slicing through her. "He's out there alone." The warrior hesitated, but before he could speak, another explosion of sound split the air, a roar, deep and primal, echoing across the cliffs. Draven. He stood on the ridge, dawn breaking behind him, his silhouette black against a rising fire. Below him, Darkvale wolves poured from the trees, Ronan at their head, his eyes burning crimson in the morning light. "Draven," Ronan's voice carried like thunder. "You've stolen what's mine." Draven's answer was calm, deadly. "You threw her away." The two alphas locked eyes across the battlefield, rivals bound by blood and pride. Ronan sneered. "You think you can hide her from me? That child is my heir." Draven took a step forward, snow crunching beneath his boots. "No, that child belongs to the one who didn't leave her to die." The wind roared between them. Then, as if the world itself took a breath, both wolves shifted, bones breaking, fur bursting through skin, howls filling the dawn. The war began with a single leap. Inside the den, Alara clutched her child tighter, tears streaking down her face. The sounds outside, growls, screams, the tearing of flesh, tore at her soul. Her heart called to Ronan still, faintly, the remnants of a bond that refused to fully die. She could feel him near, his fury, his desire for control. But another heartbeat pulsed stronger now, Draven's, fierce and steady, fighting not for power but for her. She closed her eyes, whispering to the moon, "Please, let this end." The baby whimpered. She held him closer, rocking gently, the small bundle that had cost her everything and yet given her reason to live. The healer rushed in, her silver hair streaked with soot. "We have to move," she urged. "If they breach the ridge, this den will fall." Alara hesitated, torn between fear and something greater, instinct. "No," she said softly. "He needs me." The healer stared at her, astonished. "You can't go out there." "I won't watch him die for me," Alara whispered, her eyes blazing with sudden fierce light. She wrapped her child tight in a fur bundle, placing him gently in the healer's arms. "Keep him safe," she said. The healer shook her head. "Alara, no." But she was already gone, sprinting through the tunnels that led to the battlefield. The air grew hotter with every step, filled with ash and fury. When she emerged, the sight froze her heart. Draven and Ronan locked in brutal combat, two alphas in their wolf forms, claws slashing, fangs flashing. Blood spattered the snow crimson. Ronan's wolf was larger, faster, but Draven's strikes carried purpose, precision. Alara's voice broke through the chaos. "Stop!" Both wolves turned, snarls fading. For a heartbeat, the battlefield stilled. Alara stepped forward, shaking, eyes glistening with tears. "Ronan," she whispered, "please, let it go." He shifted back into human form, blood streaking his chest, eyes wild. "You belong to me," he hissed. "That child is mine." Alara's hand trembled, but her voice didn't. "You lost us the night you left me in the snow." Ronan's face twisted with rage. "You dare defy me?" He lunged forward, claws half shifted, eyes burning red. But before he could reach her, Draven moved. In a blur, he was there, intercepting the strike, their bodies crashing together with a thunderous crack. Ronan hit the ground, gasping, blood spilling from a deep wound along his ribs. Draven stood over him, chest heaving, his wolf flickering beneath his skin. "You call yourself Alpha," Draven growled, "but you're just a coward hiding behind pride." Ronan's snarl broke into a bitter laugh. "You think she'll ever be yours? She's marked. Cursed." Draven didn't flinch. "Then I'll bear her curse with her." He turned, offering Alara his hand. A silent choice. Behind him, the sun finally broke the horizon, light spilling over the battlefield like a blessing and a warning. Alara looked at Ronan one last time, eyes filled with both sorrow and strength. "Goodbye," she said softly. Then she took Draven's hand, and as they walked away, leaving Ronan bleeding in the snow, the first light of dawn caught on Alara's tear-streaked face. She looked at Draven, at the man who had fought not to own her, but to free her. And for the first time since her rejection, she felt something new stirring in her chest. Not fear, not shame, hope. Days passed after the battle, but the echoes of it lingered in Moonspire like ghosts. The snow around the ridge had melted into dark streaks where blood had fallen, and smoke still curled from burned pines. Inside the mountain hall, Draven moved with quiet purpose, checking patrol lines, tending the wounded, but his gaze always drifted toward the healer's chamber where Alara rested. She had barely spoken since that dawn, her strength focused on feeding her newborn and breathing through the ache that still lived inside her ribs. When he finally stepped into the room, she was sitting by the fire, hair loose, eyes distant. The baby slept beside her, wrapped in soft furs. Draven paused, uncertain. She looked up and whispered, "You shouldn't risk your pack for me." His jaw tightened. "I didn't risk them," he said. "I chose what was right." She lowered her gaze, tracing the small hand of her child. "You barely know me." He knelt beside her, voice steady. "I know what it means to be broken and still stand." That night, the moon hung full and heavy over Moonspire. The pack gathered around the stone circle for the first time since the attack. Draven stood at its center, his wolf eyes bright beneath the light. "Tonight," he said, "we swear an oath. Not to blood or rank, but to the living, to those who refuse to die." The wolves lowered their heads, their howls rising like a song of rebirth. Alara stood at the edge of the circle, the infant in her arms, silver light brushing her face. For the first time, no one looked at her with pity. They looked with reverence. Draven turned toward her, his expression softening. "You belong here if you'll have us." She hesitated, her heart trembling. I'm not Luna. You're alive, he said simply. That's enough. She stepped forward, placing her palm against the ancient stone. The cold bit into her skin, but the warmth of the moment melted through it. Then I swear, she whispered, to protect this place as it protected me. After the oath, the celebration began. Quiet laughter, fires flickering, songs that rose like wind between the cliffs. Alara sat apart, rocking her child as shadows danced around them. Draven approached, offering her a cup of warm broth. You should eat, he said. The healer says you heal faster when you stop worrying. She managed a small smile. I don't remember the last time someone cared if I ate. He sat beside her, gaze on the flames. Get used to it. The silence between them felt different now. No longer heavy, but peaceful. The baby stirred, and Draven leaned closer, brushing one finger over the tiny fist. Does he have a name? Alara shook her head. I hadn't chosen one. Ronan said he'd name him after his father. Draven's eyes softened. Then choose one yourself. She looked down at the small face, tears glinting. Lyric, she whispered, because he came into the world through silence and storm. Draven nodded once. A strong name. A new one, she murmured. As nights turned to weeks, Moonspire slowly healed. The ridges grew quiet again, and the wolves rebuilt what the fire had taken. Alara began helping in the healer's hall, her gentle hands tending to wounds that reminded her of her own. The pack started to seek her out, for comfort, for calm. They began calling her the Moonheart, a name born from respect, not rank. Draven watched her from a distance, drawn but careful. His people whispered that their alpha smiled more now, that the mountains seemed less cold. Yet when he looked at Alara, he also saw danger, the kind that could undo a man who'd sworn never to love. One evening, as dust bled purple across the peaks, he found her by the stream outside the walls. She was kneeling, washing Lyric's blanket in the icy water. You should let someone else do that, he said quietly. She smiled faintly. I can't ask others to mend what I can fix. He stepped closer, voice low. You've mended more than you know. But peace never stays long in a land built on pride. That night, scouts brought grim news. Darkvale was regrouping. Ronan lived. His pride, wounded, had turned to vengeance. The messenger's words fell heavy in the council chamber. Draven's eyes darkened. He won't stop, he muttered. Alara felt her chest tighten. The room seemed to close in. He'll come for the child, she whispered. Draven met her gaze, steady as stone. Then he'll face me again, and this time he won't leave standing. She shook her head, fear and strength warring inside her. No more war. Too many have died. He paused, then said softly, Then stand with me, Alara. If he comes, he won't find a frightened Omega. He'll find a mother who stands beneath the moon. Her breath trembled. And you? A man who stands beside her. Outside, the wind howled through the peaks like a warning. But beneath the mountain's light, two hearts beat in quiet unison, the beginning of something stronger than revenge. The wind over Moonspire carried whispers, that winter night. It swept through the ridges and halls, bending the torches until their flames leaned toward the mountain's heart. Alara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ronan's face. Broken, bloody, but alive. The thought of him out there, nursing hatred, made her heart quake. She rose from her bed and wrapped Lyric in a blanket, laying him gently in the cradle by the fire. Then she stepped outside into the cold. The snow glittered under the moonlight like shards of glass. A single figure stood at the edge of the ridge, Draven. He was shirtless, his breath fogging in the chill, his back to her as he looked down at the valley below. You'll freeze, she called softly. He turned slightly, moonlight revealing the long scar that ran down his back like a lightning strike. Can't, he said. The cold reminds me I'm alive. She walked closer, her cloak dragging through the snow. Where did you get it? For a long time he said nothing. Then his voice came low and rough. From someone I trusted. He sat down on a stone, motioning for her to join him. Before I was Alpha, Moonspire was led by my father, he began. He ruled with strength, but without mercy. He thought fear was loyalty. When I turned 17, rogues raided the border. My mother begged him to spare their young. He refused. When she tried to protect them, he called her weak. I tried to stop him. His hands clenched, knuckles white. He turned on me instead. He touched the scar absently, the memory burning through his eyes. He said mercy was a curse, and that one day it would destroy me. Then he left me bleeding at the border. Ilara's breath caught, her chest tightening. You killed him, didn't you? Draven looked out over the dark valley. No, he said quietly. The pack did. When they saw what he'd done, they tore him apart. He turned toward her then, eyes softening. I swore that day I'd never become him. But sometimes I still hear his voice when I close my eyes. Ilara's throat tightened. That's why you saved me, she whispered. Because you saw her, your mother, in me. Draven's gaze flickered with something raw and unguarded. At first, he admitted, but then it became something else. The wind stilled. Their breaths came in clouds, mingling in the frozen air. You fought for me, she said softly, and I never asked you to. You didn't have to, he replied. Some things don't need asking. She looked away, blinking back tears. I don't deserve this kindness. He shook his head. You don't need to earn what's freely given. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, alive, pulsing with something new between them. For the first time since her rejection, Ilara didn't feel broken. She felt seen, truly seen. The scar on his back no longer looked like pain. It looked like proof that survival could be beautiful, even when it hurt. Later that night, as they walked back toward the den, Ilara stopped suddenly. Draven, she said, her voice trembling. There's something I need to tell you. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, though the child was already born. Before Ronan cast me out, the elders told him something about the baby. Draven turned, his expression sharp. What? They said they felt two auras. Her eyes glistened. Mine, and another ancient one, older than bloodlines. Draven frowned. That's impossible. The healer called it the moon's mark, she whispered. A spirit born under the rare lunar eclipse. Draven's pulse quickened. When was Lyric born? The night the moon vanished, she said softly. Realization dawned across his face like fire across ice. Ilara, that eclipse hasn't happened in a century. The air seemed to hum between them, heavy with meaning. If that's true, he murmured, then your child isn't just part of a prophecy. He's the reason Ronan will never stop. Before she could answer, a distant howl echoed through the peaks. Long, sharp, too close. Draven's body tensed. They're scouting again, he said grimly. Ronan's wolves. Ilara's heart raced. What does he want now? Not you, Draven said, eyes narrowing. The boy. He turned, gripping her shoulders gently. You need to leave the mountain. She shook her head, voice breaking. No, I won't run again. This isn't running, he said, his tone urgent but steady. It's surviving. The snow began to fall again, light as ash. I'll hold them off, he said. But if I don't return by sunrise... Don't say that, she whispered fiercely. You will. He hesitated, then pressed his forehead to hers. Then promise me one thing, he said softly. Raise him not to hate the world that hurt you. Teach him to change it. Her tears fell freely now. I promise. And as the snow thickened around them, Draven vanished into the storm, leaving Ilara standing beneath the moon, her child's quiet heartbeat echoing the prophecy neither of them could yet understand. The storm didn't end that night. It raged for 3 days and nights without pause, as if the heavens themselves were warning the mountains. Inside Moonspire, Ilara rocked Lyric in her arms, watching the fire crackle and listening to the wind howl like restless ghosts. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like Ronan's eyes. When the healer entered, carrying a bowl of glowing herbs, Ilara finally asked, "How long until he returns?" The old wolf woman looked at her gently. "If the alpha still breathes, you'll know. The mountain keeps his heartbeat." Ilara frowned. "What do you mean?" The healer knelt beside her, her silver hair gleaming. "There's a reason this place was built under the moonspire. It was carved over the burial ground of the first seer, the wolf who saw the blood moon prophecy." Ilara's pulse quickened. "You mean the one about the child born during the eclipse?" The healer nodded slowly. "They said the moon would send one child of two packs, one born of betrayal, one born of mercy, who would end the wars forever." Ilara's eyes widened. "Two packs. That's him." The healer nodded gravely. "And that's why Ronan will never stop hunting him. The prophecy says the child of the moon will destroy the line of Darkvale before his first full transformation." Ilara's hands trembled as she clutched Lyric closer. "He's just a baby." The healer's eyes softened. "Prophecies rarely care about time. Power grows whether you're ready or not." A crash sounded outside, wood snapping, voices shouting. Ilara froze. The healer ran to the door, flinging it open. A young scout stumbled in, covered in blood and snow. "He's alive," he gasped, "but wounded. The Alpha. He's coming back." Ilara's heart leapt. She bolted from the room, racing through the tunnels until the cold air struck her lungs. And there, at the mountain's entrance, through sheets of falling snow, she saw him, Draven, dragging himself up the steps, blood darkening his cloak, his golden eyes dim but burning still. "You shouldn't be on your feet," she cried, rushing to him. He fell to his knees. "They're coming," he whispered. "Ronan's army. The prophecy's spreading." They carried him inside, laying him before the fire. His wounds ran deep, slashes across his ribs and shoulders, but his wolf still fought within him, keeping him alive. "He needs the moon's blessing," the healer said, mixing herbs in haste. "If he loses too much blood before moonrise, we'll lose him." Ilara pressed a trembling hand to his chest. "Stay with me," she whispered. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. "I saw him," Draven rasped. "Ronan. He's not just fighting for revenge anymore. He believes killing the child will break the curse on his bloodline." Ilara's eyes filled with tears. "Then he's already lost," she said fiercely, "because I won't let him near Lyric." Draven's hand found hers, weak but firm. "If anything happens to me, take the boy north, past the frost line. The seers there will protect him." She shook her head violently. "No, we'll protect him together." His eyes softened at her stubbornness, a flicker of a smile ghosting his lips. Still defiant, he murmured, "Good." The moonlight began to filter through the cracks in the stone, painting his face silver. That night, Ilara sat beside him, her hand never leaving his. Outside, the wind shifted. The clouds parted, revealing a red glow spilling across the sky. The blood moon had risen. The mountain seemed to hum with ancient energy. Lyric stirred in his cradle, eyes flickering open for the first time, bright silver, glowing faintly in the darkness. Ilara gasped. The light pulsed in rhythm with the moon's. The healer fell to her knees. "It's begun," she whispered. "The moon's child has awakened." Draven stirred, his eyes fluttering open, catching the red glow reflected on the walls. "Ilara," he whispered, "do you see it?" She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "He's more than prophecy," she said softly. "He's hope." But before the moment could settle, the alarm bell rang through the caverns, a deep, shuddering toll. Ronan's army had reached the valley. The blood moon lit their advance, turning the snow crimson. Ilara rose, clutching Lyric to her chest, her body trembling, but her voice steady. "I won't hide anymore." Draven tried to sit up, grimacing in pain. "You can't face him alone." "I'm not alone," she said, eyes fierce beneath the red light. "Not this time." She turned toward the mountain doors as wolves prepared their defenses. The moon gave him to me for a reason, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. Maybe this is it. Draven watched her silhouette framed against the blood-colored light, and for the first time in years, he felt faith, not in destiny, in her. Alara, he called weakly. She turned. When this ends, he said, if we live through it, no more running. You, me, and the boy. Her eyes softened. Then fight, Draven, she whispered. Fight to live. Outside, the first roars echoed through the valley, and the sky burned red with prophecy and war. The final reckoning had begun. The first crash came like thunder splitting the mountain. Stone cracked, dust rained from the ceiling, and Alara's heart leapt into her throat. The war had begun. The wolves of Moonspire howled their defense, their voices echoing through every cavern. She pressed Lyric to her chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat flutter beneath her palm. The healer tried to pull her toward the back tunnels. We must go. But Alara shook her head, tears streaking down her face. He's out there. Another tremor shook the ground. Flames flickered along the corridor, casting shadows that twisted like spirits. Alara, please, the healer begged. If the prophecy is true, he must live, at all costs. Her knees buckled beneath the weight of those words. She looked down at Lyric, his silver eyes glowing faintly even in the dark. At all costs, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Another roar outside, Ronan's. His fury carried even through the stone. The same voice that once whispered love now called for her blood. Smoke seeped through the cracks, the scent of burning pine and fir filling her lungs. The air grew thick, each breath harder than the last. She stumbled through the tunnels, following the faint glow of torchlight. Behind her, the mountain groaned under the siege. She could hear claws on stone, screams echoing from above. But one sound cut deeper, Draven's voice shouting her name through the chaos. She turned toward it, her heart surging with hope. Draven, she called back. But the roar of collapsing rock drowned her out. The tunnel split before her. One path led toward the exit, the other toward the battlefield. The healer's words echoed again. He must live. Alara hesitated, tears spilling. I can't leave him, she whispered to Lyric. He saved us. I have to save him. She pressed a trembling kiss to her child's forehead, then hid him in a hollow behind the stone altar, wrapping him in furs. Stay quiet, my moonlight, she whispered. I'll come back. The heat grew unbearable as she crawled through the lower tunnels. The ground shook beneath her palms, dust choking her lungs. Every step was agony, every heartbeat a drum of fear. She reached a narrow opening that looked out over the main hall, and froze. The battle raged below. Wolves clashed in a storm of teeth and fire, the snow outside now black with soot. At the center stood Draven, wounded but unyielding, his golden eyes flashing like the sun through smoke. Opposite him, Ronan moved with monstrous fury, half shifted, his claws dripping red. You stole what's mine, he roared. You stole my legacy. Draven's voice came back calm but cold. You threw it away. Alara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning. She wanted to scream, to stop them, but her voice caught in her throat. Then Ronan lunged, faster than she'd ever seen. Draven met him mid-strike, claws locking, blood spilling. The impact shook the hall. For a moment, she thought the world itself would break apart. When the two alphas crashed to the floor, she moved without thinking. No, she cried, scrambling through the gap and down the rubble. Her feet hit the stone just as Ronan rose, towering over Draven, his claws poised to strike. Stop, she shouted. He turned, red eyes burning with madness. You, the word dripped venom. You should have died in the snow. His claws arced toward her, but she didn't flinch. You already killed the woman you left there, she said softly. You won't kill what she became. Something in her voice made him falter. For the first time, hesitation flickered in his eyes. In that heartbeat, Draven surged upward, driving him back with a roar that shook the walls. The two crashed against the altar where Lyric was hidden. A soft cry pierced the noise. The babies. All three froze. Ronan's gaze snapped toward the sound, and Alara's world slowed to a single breath. "He's mine," Ronan hissed, lunging toward the cradle. But before his claws could reach, Alara stepped between them, arms outstretched. The blow never landed. A blinding silver light burst from the cradle, flooding the hall with brilliance. The wolves fell back, shielding their eyes. The blood moon shone through a crack in the ceiling, its light bending around the child like a halo. Lyric's small hands reached toward the air, and the flames around them dimmed, flickering out one by one. The mountain fell silent. Even Ronan froze, his claws trembling midair. Alara turned slowly, tears glimmering on her cheeks. "You see?" she whispered. "He was never yours to claim." The silver light swirled like wind around them, and when it faded, Ronan stumbled back, his eyes wide with something she'd never seen in him before: fear. Draven pulled himself to his feet, his voice low and certain. "The prophecy isn't about power," he said. "It's about mercy." Ronan's lips curled in confusion just as the ground beneath him cracked open, the mountain's ancient magic finally answering the moon's call. He fell back into the darkness, his roar fading into silence. The siege was over. When dawn came, the smoke had cleared, leaving the valley quiet again. The fires were out, the sky pale gold over the snow. Alara stood at the entrance of the mountain, Lyric in her arms, his silver eyes calm now, reflecting the morning light. Behind her, Draven limped forward, his arm bandaged, his breath steady. "It's done," he said softly. She nodded. "He's gone." "And the child?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Still shining." They stood together as the sun rose, the blood moon fading into day. For the first time, peace didn't feel like a lie. It felt earned. Alara looked at Draven, her heart swelling with quiet strength. "We survived," she whispered. He met her gaze, his golden eyes warm. "No," he said gently. "We began." The mountain slept at last. After the siege, Moonspire lay wrapped in quiet, smoke rising from the ashes, wolves moving slowly through the broken halls, their eyes weary but alive. Alara stood at the ridge where dawn kissed the peaks, the wind tugging at her hair. Below, the valley glittered with frost, untouched now by fire or fear. She breathed deeply, tasting the cold air, the scent of pine and snow. The pain in her chest had dulled, replaced by something steadier. Peace, perhaps, or purpose. Behind her, Draven's voice broke the silence. "They're rebuilding," he said softly. She turned to find him leaning on a crutch, his arm still bandaged, his golden eyes brighter than she'd ever seen them. "You should rest," she told him. "You should lead," he countered gently. She smiled faintly. "I'm no alpha." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You're something rarer." His hand brushed her cheek, rough and warm. "You're the reason they still believe." The words settled between them, heavy with truth. In the days that followed, Moonspire began to heal. Wolves from other territories came seeking refuge, broken packs, wandering souls, rogues without homes. They found not a fortress, but a sanctuary. Alara worked beside them, cleaning wounds, rebuilding walls, tending fires. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her, not with doubt, but reverence. They began calling her Luna of the Lost, a name she never sought but couldn't deny. At first she resisted it, laughing softly when the younger wolves bowed. "I'm not Luna," she'd say. But the title clung to her like moonlight, gentle, yet impossible to shake. One evening, she caught her reflection in the stream, hair tangled, face pale, but her eyes, they weren't the eyes of an Omega anymore. They burned steady, like the heart of a storm. When she looked at Lyric sleeping nearby, she saw both what she'd lost and what she'd gained. She whispered to the water, "If I was chosen for this, let me be worthy." Draven found her there later, standing ankle-deep in the freezing stream. "You'll catch your death," he said. "Too late for that," she teased. He stepped beside her, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the surface. "They look to you now," he said. "Not me." Because you saved them, she replied. I just stood beside you. He shook his head. You did more than stand. His gaze held hers, fierce and unflinching. You reminded me what leading means. Not control, not fear, faith. She swallowed hard, her heart racing. Draven, he smiled slightly. You don't need to say anything. But she did. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You did fight, he said softly. Even dying in the snow, you didn't give up. You just needed someone to remind you what you were capable of. Their hands brushed, fingers tangling briefly before they both looked away, shy but certain. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was promise. That night, the pack gathered beneath the full moon. The scars of battle still marked the walls, but hope shone brighter than any wound. Alara stood among them, Lyric in her arms as the wolves howled their rebirth. Draven lifted his gaze to the sky. We stand not as separate packs, he declared, his voice carrying through the mountains, but as one, bound not by bloodlines but by choice. The wolves echoed his words, their voices rising in unity. Then, to Alara's surprise, he turned toward her. Moonspire stands because of her, he said. Because when the world cast her out, she chose to rise instead of kneel. The crowd fell silent, the wind stilled, and then slowly every wolf in the circle bowed their head to her. Alara froze, tears burning behind her eyes. Draven stepped forward, his voice low. Alara of the Moonspire, he said, by the will of the pack and the blessing of the moon, do you accept the bond of Luna? She looked at Lyric, then at him. I do, she whispered. The moonlight bathed them both in silver. When the howls rose again, they carried not sorrow, but joy. Draven reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. You've come a long way from the snow, he murmured. She smiled, eyes glistening. No, she said softly. I've come home. As the pack celebrated around them, Lyric stirred, his tiny hand reaching for the sky, the faint shimmer of silver light glowing from his fingertips. Alara looked up at the moon, her heart steady, her fear finally quiet. The prophecy had never been about war or destruction. It had always been about renewal. She had been rejected, broken, cast out to die, but through pain she had become something more. Not Ronan's Luna, not a victim, but a mother, a leader, a survivor, the Luna of Moonspire. And as the night wind swept through the valley, carrying the pack's howls into the stars, Alara whispered one last vow to the moon that had never abandoned her. Never again will I bow to the ones who tried to break me. The sky over Moonspire bled from night into gold, the first light of dawn stretching across the snow like a soft promise. Alara stood on the ridge, her cloak trailing behind her, the cold wind brushing strands of hair across her face. Below, the valley shimmered with quiet life, smoke rising from rebuilt hearths, laughter echoing faintly from the lower dens. It was strange how peace could feel louder than war. She breathed deeply, watching her breath curl in the air. Behind her, Lyric toddled on uncertain legs, giggling as he tried to chase a butterfly that had somehow survived the frost. Every sound of him was a miracle. Every laugh, proof that destiny had not been cruel for nothing. Alara knelt and lifted him into her arms, pressing a kiss to his dark curls. You'll see the world whole, she whispered, not broken like we found it. The wind carried her words into the horizon. For the first time, the mountain didn't echo them back. It simply listened. Inside the main hall, the fire burned low as Draven sat sharpening a blade that would never again see war. He looked up when Alara entered, Lyric cradled against her shoulder. You should be resting, he said, though his tone carried no real reprimand. And you should stop pretending you're still a warrior, she teased. He smiled, faint and tired, setting the blade aside. I'll rest when the mountain does. She crossed to him, lowering Lyric into his cradle, then sank onto the bench beside him. For a long while they said nothing. The crackle of fire filled the silence, warm and soft. Finally, Draven spoke. When I first found you, I thought saving you would bring peace." He looked down at his scarred hands. "I didn't realize peace doesn't come from saving anyone. It comes from standing beside them." Alara's eyes softened. "You've stood beside me every step." "No," he said quietly. "Sometimes you walked ahead." Her smile was small but full. "Then maybe it's time you caught up." That night, the Moonspire wolves gathered one final time in the great courtyard. The moon was pale, gentle, no longer red with blood, but white with renewal. Torches lined the stone walls, and the air hummed with quiet anticipation. Draven stood before the pack, his expression solemn. "For generations, we fought for dominance," he began. "We built walls and drew borders, calling them pride. But this," he gestured to the gathered wolves, to the laughter, to the calm, "this is strength." He turned toward Alara, who stood beside Lyric, moonlight tracing her features. "It was never about who ruled. It was about who healed." The wolves bowed their heads, not out of fear, but reverence. Alara stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "We lost much to reach this dawn," she said, "but from loss comes light. We will teach our children not to fear the moon's shadow, but to dance beneath it." The pack howled then, not as Darkveil or Moonspire, but as one. Their voices rose like a prayer of rebirth. Even the wind seemed to pause listening. When the ceremony ended, Alara slipped away from the crowd, climbing the path that wound to the top of the ridge. The view spread before her, miles of forest and snow, rivers glinting like silver veins beneath the moon. She thought of the girl who had once knelt in the snow, begging not to die. She thought of the woman who had risen from that same snow, child in arms, heartbroken but unbowed. And now, standing at the peak, she understood what the moon had been trying to tell her all along. Strength wasn't in teeth or claws or bloodlines. It was in endurance, in mercy, in the courage to love after loss. She closed her eyes, feeling the wind brush against her scars, and whispered, "Thank you." A wolf's howl echoed faintly from below, Draven's rich and low. She smiled. "I'm coming," she said softly, and for once her voice didn't tremble when she turned toward the path back home. Later, as dawn broke fully, light spilled across the valley in sheets of gold. Alara and Draven stood together at the mountain's edge, Lyric between them, his small hands clutching theirs. The child laughed as the sun rose higher, its warmth brushing their faces. "He looks like you," Draven murmured. "No," Alara said, smiling. "He looks like what we built." The air was still, peaceful. "What will you tell him?" Draven asked. "When he's old enough to ask about that night?" She looked down at Lyric, her eyes glistening with quiet pride. "That once a mother was left to die in the snow," she said, "but the moon sent her a wolf who refused to walk away. And together they learned that love isn't weakness, it's survival." Draven reached out, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "And if he asks what became of them?" Alara smiled, her voice steady as the sunrise. "They lived," she said simply, "and they never bowed again." The wind rose one last time, carrying her words across the peaks as the sun crowned the horizon, marking not an ending, but the beginning of everything they had fought to become. And that is where her story finally found peace. Alara was rejected, broken, and left to die. But she rose anyway. She became everything they said she never could. If her journey moved you, let me know in the comments. Tell me where in the world you watched from, and what part of her story you'll carry with you. Drop it if you believe that even after the darkest night, the moon always rises again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more stories like this one are coming soon. Stories of love, loss, and the courage to stand back up. Until next time, keep your heart wild, and may your moon never fade.